Right, so I'm just will share my slides. Okay. All right. Before I start, I think in this talk I would emphasize the importance of psychological state of humans in space and how this affects in general the work of the crews, and also how the physical pain or physical discomfort can play a role in your good mental state. So Institute of Biomedical Problems is leading organization in space medicine and biology, and it was founded in 60s by Korolev. Korolev is the founder of Soviet cosmonautics, and he's the one who sent Gagarin to space. Well, it's the same as here in US, Werner von Braun. And back then he realized that we need to study what will happen with humans and animals in extreme environment of space. So first isolation experiment was back in 60s, and it called Year in a Starship, where 3 men spent a year in really confined space. It was around 55 square meters. And after a few months, there was attached a greenhouse, and the whole station supposed to do the fully recycling. So their urine was recycled into water, and oxygen was also recycling. And they were growing, of course, food in the greenhouse, but it wasn't enough for proper meals and for the calories that they needed. But overall, experiment was harsh, but still, these 3 brave test subjects, they fulfilled all the tasks, and there wasn't any fights, but of course there was a conflict. And for me, it's always interesting the fact that the 2 crew members, they didn't get along, but when they got out from the experiment, they were feeling totally fine. But the 3rd crew member, who always was in between in this conflict, he had stomach inflammation due to stress, constant stress, because he always needed to balance between these 2 competitors, I guess. And another interesting fact that there was even a love story, not inside, but so all the tasks that they had to do, they communicated through special speaker that was inside of this station. And so the scientists or PIs, they've been talking to them what to do and guided them in terms of instructions. And so one of the test subjects heard this nice lady's voice, and he fell for her. So they started to write letters to each other secretly. And every time when there was a new delivery of food or of the plants, so the lady was hiding this letter there, and vice versa. So when the test subject came out from experiment, they actually got married. Yeah, so love can be even in this extreme and weird environment. So this experiment proved that you can survive and fulfill all the tasks in confined environment. And after that, Institute of Biomedical Problems started to do many other experiments. And of course, you heard about Mars 500. It's still a record-breaking experiment due to the duration. So 6 crew members spent 520 days in isolation without any sunlight, without talking to outside world, only through like internal internet communication. And here also we have some unique moments. For example, there is a Chinese crew member, and he was chosen the last minute. So when he came to the experiment, he didn't speak Russian and English. But he still went into the experiment, and in a few months, we noticed that the crew communicate quite well with him. So they kind of managed to create this language, which was symbols and mix of English and Russian, and maybe even Chinese, who knows. So the crew lost weight during this experiment, and also they had food studies. So for example, they for some period of time they had to eat only sweet, then all the food without any salt, or only cold. And yeah, so I think that was really extreme, because when you're in isolation and when you're limited in many pleasures, you find that for you, all of a sudden, the food becomes the one and only pleasure. And so these guys, they suffered even in this matter. But overall, still, no fist fights and all of that in 520 days. Just imagine 5 male test subjects stuck in one confined space. And of course, there would be like probably ego issues or any other arguments and irritation. But no, they did great. And which again proved to us that humans are capable of withstanding different environment during long period of time. And here we simulated, of course, the trip to Mars. So for now, it's 7 months to the red planet. Then you would stay there like a year and a half and then back 7 months, which is really, I think, will be one of the toughest challenges for future astronauts, and one of the most unpredictable thing that no scientists and engineers can work towards the risk mitigation is the human factor. So that's why when people ask me, why are you still doing all these isolation experiments or Moon or Mars analog experiments? It's, there have been so many of them because we are still working on how we can mitigate the human factor in space, or human reaction to what's happening during space flight. Of course, you know about the Mars Society and Mars Desert Research Station. So I started my path as a test subject or analog astronaut at Mars Desert Research Station. So they did usually they do 2 weeks missions, but in our case, in the mission Mars 160, we had 3 months at Utah Desert, and then another 3 months on Devon Island. It's an uninhabitable island in Canadian Arctic. And there you really feel isolated. I think for the first time in my life, I felt that I'm in maybe in some kind of Star Wars movies on the isolated planet. And so here the psychology works differently, because you understand that you and 5 other crew members, it's everything that you got in terms of skills, in terms of communication and friendship and everything. Also, here you really think that you really feel that you're at the danger, since it's just an uninhabitable island, and the air communication really depend on weather conditions. So if something happened to us critical with our health, and weather is not good, we would wait for the plane to pick us up maybe for a week. So before that, I took the rescue courses, and I'm certified rescuer in Russia. And because I wanted to be prepared, also we have a polar bears there, and hopefully we don't have it on Mars or on the Moon. So this one, this is not the big issue. But anyway, there were many dangers like frostbites, polar bears, any other incident that can happen during, like electrical system, like working with electrical system or anything else. So I even took surgical devices, just in case if there would be open wound or something like that. And of course, my dad, he said, okay, while I was packing, he said, for sure, take the bottle of vodka. So this will be useful in any case. And happily, we didn't use the surgical devices. I'm not going to talk about the vodka, but no, of course, not during the simulation, but in general, we really were feeling alone, because at MDRS, you understand you're in Utah and you're 30 minutes drive from the closest small town, but here it's not the case. So what was another interesting aspect, here you can just see where we've been, and you can see with the pink lines, it's our routes that we've been doing during the whole months. Unfortunately, we didn't stay for 3 months. We did only 1 month due to weather conditions. And of course, we're really limited to everything. Here, our crew. Most of the experiments were dealing with looking for life on Mars. So basically it's geology and exobiology. And we've been looking for gypsum. On Mars, there are plenty of gypsum. And in gypsum, actually, you can find extremophiles, which is microorganisms that survive in extreme environment. And many scientists hope that when we get to Mars and we mine the gypsum, we can actually find the halophiles there, and we then can analyze it and understand how old are they, and if they can still be alive. So here you can see the left side is gypsum that we found in Utah, and the right side is in Arctic. So this is the environment of the station in the Arctic. As you can see, a lot of gray colors. Also, when we arrived there, the last time any human was at the station was 5 years ago. So we didn't know in which condition the station is. And there was some electrical problems at the first level of the station. So that's why we never had actually the artificial lighting there. And all the light that we could get, it's what you see at this picture. And for me, as a person who lived in Russia, usually we have this kind of weather most of the time of the year, which is snow with rain and gray sky. So I'm kind of used to that. But for other crew members who are from other parts of the world, I noticed that after a few weeks, the gray colors, the gray sky, all the time cold, and all these different factors, they start to affect them. And so even like on mentally, so they started to be more slow, not so cheerful, and kind of in the mode standby, something like that, if you know what I mean. So for me, it was really interesting to see that. And I was telling them that the best cure to feel alive is to do the physical exercise. And of course, if we are talking about the real stations and how they should be designed, it's very important to have a lot of light and warm light. So the colors also affect your mental health. So less gray colors, more light, more white colors mixed with warm. And also, I think it's important, and we will talk about it later, the materials that we're gonna use. So here, back then, I already cooperated with Institute of Biomedical Problems, and we did just a little bit of psychological studies. And here you can see the anxiety level of different crew members. And it's interesting that, for example, the crew member B, he didn't have any changes in his anxiety level. So during all 80 days, he stayed pretty chill. But other crew members, they experienced different periods of anxiety. Why you see that most of us had a higher anxiety level in the beginning of the mission, because it was all new. We had to adjust to new conditions and sort out many things. So that's why we've been more anxious. And then in the middle, of course, when everything became a routine, you're more calm and more stable. And at the end, again, you're excited because there are just a few days before you get out and how you would react to this new world. So I found it really interesting, that difference. And of course, this is our crew commander who writes to psychologists at IBMP. And I think when you live in extreme environment, you really need to have sense of humor to get through that. And that's what we had. So after that, I participated in scientific international research in unique terrestrial station. This is joint studies with NASA and Institute of Biomedical Problems. Here you can see that the crew is 50-50 females and males, and also international. So in the crew, we had to speak Russian and English language. And our crew commander, he's a real cosmonaut who was on ISS in 2014, Evgeny Tarelkin. The whole mission was in the same facilities where was Mars 500. So you would ask why NASA decided to do it here, why this whole studies they didn't do in US. The reason is that this station is unique. It has its own atmosphere, air pressure, it's fully hermetic. All the life support systems controlled outside. I know, of course, this wouldn't be the case in real space missions, but for the safety, for other measures, they decided to have the full control from outside. So during the experiment, we have 24-hour shifts, and there are 4 people: technician, engineer, doctor, and the lab worker. So in this station, we have more than 80 cameras. Of course, we don't have cameras in the crew quarters, in toilet, and in shower. But everywhere else, we have different cameras with different resolution. So anytime the crew, the engineers and doctors, they can look at the crew and monitor what's happening. So just a quick tour. Basically, each number that I will name, it's cubic meters of this cylindrical form modules. So this is 150 module, where you have 6 crew quarters, kitchen and living room. This is 50 cubic meters module, and it simulates the lander or spaceship. And from this spaceship, in the legend or scenario that we created, crew members go out and go to the simulation of Martian or lunar surface and conduct the EVA. The biggest module is 250. You have fridges and storage room and training room, shower. And from there, we can get to a medical module where we have all the blood sampling, urine sampling, and ultrasound, and many other experiments. So yes, this is what you can see from inside. And I know that many would be surprised why you have wood, why it looks like sauna, you know. So back, I think in 2020, when they were rebuilding a little bit the station, so they decided that first of all, since the station is fully hermetic, we need to have inside materials that wouldn't gas, that wouldn't have any toxic gases, you know, with the time that can affect the crew members. So as less as possible plastic and other materials, and that's why they decided to have the real wood. Apart from that, psychologists back then said that wood is actually really good for mental health. But for now, of course, I think it's really challenging and interesting what kind of materials we can use in the real moon or Mars stations, and also how with the time they would change, and you know, what consequences it can cause. So this is another really interesting path that, you know, I hope someone is already studying. And that's on the left, you can see the mission control room, mission support room, and on the right, because hangar is small, so it's not like you really walk on the moon. So we decided to combine it with VR system. So crew member actually have been seeing moon surface like you can see it here. Yeah, and this is the module of the lander. So the legend was in Sirius mission that we are going to the moon orbital station, and we stay there for many months, and then from time to time we'll land to the moon, stay there for 2 weeks, conduct experiments, and then go back to the orbital station. And so we had first experiment was 17 days in 2017, and one of the crew members there, Anna Kikina, she just flew on a Crew Dragon 5 mission. So she's the only Russian who flew on the SpaceX Crew Dragon spaceship, and it was in the beginning of October. So she started this isolation experiment, and she was there. Then it was our experiment that was a duration of 4 months. And just in July, IBMP and NASA finished the 8 months serious experiment. So when we go to this module 50, it's only for 4 crew members who go there. The two other crew members, they stay at the orbital station. So we close the hatch, and then the guys spend there 2 weeks. So as you can see, not much of personal space. We have these curtains, but that's it. I mean, you can hear everything, smell everything. You don't have showers here, only restroom. And it's also interesting how crew reacts after the separation of from the main crew, and also being even more confined, being even more intimate. So here are studies that we've been doing in the Sirius mission, and I think you can say that we've been lab rats, but for the good cause. So this really was motivational for me, that maybe even a small part, but if I'm useful, and if I bring the useful data to the scientists, that will help in the future for humans to stay healthy and happy in space, that's all I need. So you can see this, mostly it's psychological studies. As I said, that the human factor is the major risk. And here, I don't know if the video will be good, but we are simulating here the different gravity. So it's Martian gravity, moon gravity, and Earth gravity. Okay. It's in Russian, I'm sorry. So yeah, here Daria here simulates the moon gravity, and so you can see there is a sensors on her legs, which tell how muscles differently react to different gravity. And here, short video of showing the many experiments that we did, and just quick overview. Yeah, so we've been giving our samples, and I always joke because first of all, of course, everyone wanted our blood, and scientists are really greedy for the blood. So I think the record was that in one day, we from each crew member, we had to give blood for 25 tubes, this, yeah. And then our saliva, urine, the number 2, I don't know the scientific way to say it. So, and even hair. So saliva and hair were used to see the level of cortisol in the crew members. And so I was joking that what will be next, our tears and maybe sweat. And of course, we learned how to do the ultrasound, and we had the test on our vision, how it changed with isolation. And here it's a really interesting test from German scientists, and you have to put on this sensors, and it's 16 sensors, and you have to spend like 24 hours in this, sleeping and walking, everything. So it monitors your whole system. And it takes us, first time it took us an hour to put it on correctly. Yeah, we look pretty silly, but everything for science. And as you can see, she has this white box. This device is from NASA, Human Research Program. And this device is basically monitors how often we interact with each other and how close we interact with each other. So it's a part of psychological study. Here we had also interesting experiments from Germans. It's an experiment by Hoffman, where you start working on a treadmill. At the same time, they take blood sample from your finger, and at the same time, you have to do some cognitive test. But then speed increases, and after 9 kilometers per hour, so speed start to increase every 30 seconds. And of course, crew surgeon monitors your heart rate. So here they wanted to see your limit. And basically, when you reach 180 RPM, you stop. And we had, I think the record for the speed was from our crew member, 21 km/h. Yeah, and here is another amazing, it's still, I think it's from Soviet times, this machine, it's passive treadmill. And the passive treadmill usually now also on ISS, not this one, much more advanced, but basically you make it move. And this is the crucial exercise for keeping healthy and not to lose bone density and not to have muscle atrophy on ISS. So we also had to do that, and all the crew members didn't like this because it's really tough. So and as you can see here, you have different speeds and regimes that you have to follow. And basically it's running in the sand in heavy boots with backpack. Yeah, let's see here. So it's like hamster in the wheel. And of course, food. So another interesting thing that I've noticed, that after 2 months, you stop having pleasure from eating the food. Although we had 7 days menu, so it's quite, we have variety, and we had a little bit of greenhouse harvest. It's dehydrated food mostly, and in the tubes, but still it's after 2 months it seems all the same. You want something new, but you don't have it. So what I noticed that some of the crew members start to eat less, just to eat, just to have some calories, but they didn't really enjoy it. So you don't get the satisfaction from the food. And also it becomes one of the most desirable thing. Like we used to gather together and dream, oh, I wish I could eat steak now, or shrimps and something like that. So I don't know how we can manage this problem on Mars if we stay there for several years. For sure, if already in 2 months the food became boring and not it didn't satisfy us, but what will happen in a year? So it's another interesting aspect to study and to resolve somehow. And here I will show you the video that shows the importance of exercise to keep your sanity, to keep you alive, to feel that your blood is moving and that you're actually getting this stimulation. Because in the real world, you have a lot of different stimulation from, everything is changes around you, you meet new people, you do something, there is always something going on. But in isolation, you have less and less of the new stimulations, and our psychology, our body actually used to that. So in this case, what can help is physical exercise, and of course the new technology. So it's like virtual reality or augmented reality. And you can see that now everyone is training, almost all the crew members. Specialist number 1. Mission specialist number 3. И кто в главной роли? Наш командир. And again, sense of humor. Okay, so we talked about isolation experiments, but let's talk about the experiments on microgravity. So back in the 70s, after the flight of 17 days flight of Soyuz 9, where 2 cosmonauts didn't really move much, they didn't have much space to move around in this spaceship. So when they landed, they were so weak that they couldn't even get out from the spaceship. So they had muscle atrophy, they had heart problems. And with this incident, scientists of Institute of Biomedical Problems realized that they need to create some kind of a model to study the negative effects of microgravity. And they did it. First, it was wet immersion. Basically, the test subjects, they were in the pool of water and they had to spend there several days, but this causes severe skin problems. So after that, they changed this model to dry immersion studies. And here you can see the model. And here's what it is in reality. So from 70s up to 2020, all the experiments were only with male test subjects. And when I asked them why like women, they wouldn't fly to space, or you don't need to study them. So scientists said that, well, yeah, before in Russia in Soviet times, only men mostly flew. We have only like 4 women in the history of 50 years who flew to space. So, and they said it's challenging due to the hormones and due to the, like simple issues such as such as peeing. So for men, it's way easier because they can just bring you, special kind of device and that's it. But for women, it's a bit more complicated. But we sorted out this problem. So we, one of our scientists, she created the prototype of this kind of like a pump. And as you can see here, we lay down in this bath for, we had to do that for 3 days. This is the first experiment. That's why they didn't do it for longer. And this is the device that she created for our number one needs. And what interesting is that I would never thought that it will be so challenging to just, to do that in horizontal position and unsupported. So your body doesn't understand how to do that. Your brain sends the signal that, okay, Anastasia, you need to pee. But nothing is happening because you need some kind of support. Your body used to that, or you need to be in horizontal, in a vertical position. So this was really interesting how this such an easy thing can actually cause a trouble. And also in the first day when you're in this bath, your body starts to it gets rid of extra pressure caused by the water that surrounds you, and especially water pressures your lower part of the body. So you start to lose a lot of liquid to get rid of this extra pressure. And on the second day, also, we've noticed that my spine stretched in 1.5 centimeters. So I lost about 2 kilograms. Mostly it was liquids. I lost 2 liters of water, and I became higher 1.5 centimeters. And people were saying, wow, it's so cool. You can lose weight, you can be taller. And I usually tell them, well, everything, this all will go back when you get out from the bath and, face the Earth's gravity again. So yeah, we've been laying down in this bath for 3 days, and they've been bringing us food, any other needs. Once a day, they were taking us out for 10 minutes, where you have to do your number 2 and take a shower, but also in horizontal position. And it was really interesting. I never took a shower laying down. So what was the real outcome of that? So first of all, we saw that there is not such a big difference between men and women in dry immersion. Second, it's interesting that almost all the male test subject had really strong back pain, and female test subjects, they didn't have it. So they still tried to analyze what's going on. After that, we already had a mission for 5 days with all females, and they're planning to do it for longer duration, because the longest one in the modern days that we did, it's with a male test subject, was 21 day. Of course, in 21 day, you can see way more reaction to the, for example, in muscle atrophy, in the heart problems, and in your nerves, nerves reaction, and so on. So we had around 20 experiments so far during this dry immersion period. So we've been busy, and actually I didn't have even time to be bored there. But it's a way different feeling. I was thinking about it. So before, I was in isolation, which limited many things in my life. But being in the dry immersion, it limits even more. So you cannot even walk and do something independently. You always need to ask someone for help, and you just stuck there in the bath. So it's really interesting how you can narrow your world, and how you can, which limits you can really withstand. We also have another different devices and experiments at IBMP. This one is a short radius centrifuge, and they plan to implement that, well, someday at the space station, because that will be even more effective than the exercise that astronauts, cosmonauts do now on ISS for the health of their muscles and bone density. So here's they propose that if you spend in this short radius centrifuge like half an hour every day, this actually would cause positively, and it kind of creates the Earth gravity effect on your body. So I'm really excited, and I cannot wait when this would happen. And I don't know now, but hopefully it will happen in the next 10 years, when we'll have another useful devices to help humans to stay healthy in microgravity. And this unique experiment, ARFA. So on Mars, we have really low magnetic field, and there have been studies on mice that when there is low magnetic field, it can affect your cognitive functions and your fertility. So what we will do on Mars, just imagine we sent astronauts there, and they spent, well, a year, and then they would just couldn't report to us. They would be maybe dumb, So we need also to study this, and we started this series of experiments. So far, it's only a short amount of time. It's 8 hours exposure, and test subject sits in this kind of cage. You cannot have any electronic devices inside, so you just do the old school, play chess, read books. This experiment actually didn't show much of the changes, and of course it's due to like really short period of time. But it will be hard also to find test subject who is ready to risk his cognitive health and stay in the low magnetic field for many days or even months. So I'm curious how scientists would decide what to do with this problem, which actually should be, I think, addressed more than the radiation on Mars. Okay, so what's time? Yeah, so I have 15 minutes, I guess, for questions, and I'm happy to take them.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating insight into isolated and extreme environments and analog experiments. And I've learned so much. So I'm going to see, we've got lots of questions in the chat, but I'm just going to see if people want to ask their own questions. Let me see whose hands are up first. Going to gallery view. All right, so if anyone asks the questions in the chat, would they like to ask the question directly to Anastasia themselves? Raise your hand and then I'll call your name out. Otherwise, I can just do it. There we go. So we've got some raised hands. So Nadia, if you come up, Nadia Mirza Sadi, if you ask your question, that'd be great. Unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First, that was an amazing presentation. I've been really excited to hear from you. Yeah, thank you. So I have some questions about the recent experiment with the bath. In terms of why they did the experiment itself, because I was thinking how they looked into like palliative care, because a lot of elderly patients, they'll be doing exactly what you guys were doing in that horizontal position, probably surrounded by blankets and pillows and things like that too. I don't know if that would affect the same pressure in the same way that you had it, but have they compared with that possibly? Because the scenario is very similar.
So you mean that the same problem with the restroom for the elderly people being in horizontal position?
Same as you were saying, showers, eating, restroom as well. I mean, they end up really living in that position for the remainder, however long that is. It could be years, you know, that someone's in that horizontal position as an elderly patient. So I was wondering if that had been considered with that experiment and what that meant for you.
Well, I know that the dry immersion bath actually been used in medical in hospitals and for the medical use. So mostly for the children and for in general people with with the muscle diseases, you know, with the damn it, I don't know this word in English, sorry. So basically, yes, they're using it for the medical health. And in terms of comparing it with the lifestyle of some of the older people, no, we didn't do that. I know that the dry immersion bath, it doesn't, create the same effects, so the like 100% effects of microgravity, but it does simulate like some of the effects and the most negative ones, and that's why it's been useful to study it using the dry immersion.
Thank you. I was also wondering how UTIs were prevented in that scenario, like urinary tract infections.
Oh, yeah. So you mean UTI dealing with the feminine hygiene?
Just generally the tract itself just getting infected.
So we luckily we could take shower every day. So this was also helping, and we had this like 24-hour shifts of the doctors who were always monitoring our health and looking at our skin rash or anything like that. But since we've been only 3 days, it's like short period. But the test subject that were for 21 days, yes, they had some skin rash and maybe some other issues, but straight away there are doctors that helped and used everything they could.
Thank you so much, Nadia. If you can put your sort of hand down, that would be great. Thank you for great questions. Actually, I had a quick question and then I'll hand over to the other people. So what were there any perceptual anomalies that developed or illusions or and was there an association with if there was there an association with length of time in isolation? And are there specific missions that give rise to that more? And I'm just thinking about the missions that where you're more isolated, or than other missions. So
our perception of the time, how it changed.
So just anomalies, illusions, seeing things that might not be there, visual illusions, auditory illusions, even hallucinations, maybe vivid dreams or anything, more vivid dreams, or remembering them anyway.
Yeah, we didn't have hallucinations, but we did have really vivid dreams. So they were like really more realistic than what we had in isolation. I mean, the life was way more better there in the dreams, more diverse.
You're interested.
And we did have interesting approach to time. So in a series, we had the even experiment with the time. Basically, the crew member sits in front of you, and he cannot wear a watch, he cannot count inside of his head, but he just needs to tell me, and I'm watching on my on the timer when 1 minute pass. And so I did it with all the crew members during 4 months, every month. And interesting that it stayed the same. So one crew member, for him, 1 minute was actually only 20 seconds. And for the other crew member, it was instead of 1 minute, it was 2 minutes. And this perception kept going through the 4 months. And also, you don't measure your time on a scale of calendar, but you know that today is Sunday because today we have on our schedule a shower day. So and so you kind of you change your perception of the time in general. And it's interesting that the less stimulations you have and more routine you have, I think you start to be much more excited with the tiny small things, and also not only excited but also like upset. So yeah, it's really, everything changes there.
It's so fascinating. I'm going to hand over, but it's sometimes the brain compensates, doesn't it? So if we don't have the visual stimuli to stimulate us, enough visual stimuli to stimulate us, I wonder if that's one of the hypotheses or plausible explanations about why the brain then has more vivid dreams. I'm sure there's multiple explanations or possible explanations, but I'll hand over to Martina next to ask her questions. She had a bunch of great questions.
Yeah, I have like 5 questions, but I know we are running out of time, so I'll try to be time conscious so Mary also can get her questions in. So the first question is about medical experiments on anxiety. You were showing a graph. How were you measuring it? You mentioned cortisol. Was that your measure, or did you look at measures like heart rate variability, self-reporting, sleep patterns? And also, how do you see these options changing with us having wearables that are more accessible and measuring more things cheaper and easier?
Yeah, so the graph that I showed, it was in Mars 160 mission. So back then we were limited to, so we only had these self-reporting. Basically, it's the different surveys from our psychologist, and also Lucier test. But in series, yes, we had different measures, the different way to measure the anxiety. So it was the cortisol level. Basically, it's our saliva, our hair, also the sleep pattern, and many surveys, and also the how we behave on the cameras. So there was a psychologist who monitored us during this whole 4 months. And so she also made some notes, and she also was talking to us once a week. So it's like a mix of different, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's really useful. And my second group of questions is related to the experiments and partnerships and funding and recruiting. How do you choose the experiments and the partners? And how do you go about recruiting, and how are you funding all of that? Because I can imagine that not everyone can just afford to drop out from life, like for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months.
Yeah, so we have many partners, I mean, in this project series. So of course, the major one is NASA, and most of the experiments were from Human Research Program. But then we also have partners with in Germany, in Czech Republic, in France, I think even in China, in Japan. So yeah, so first of all, they send the research to our scientists, to our PIs, and they analyze it and see if that's what can be implemented and wouldn't affect much, the crew health. And then they negotiate about, the price and so on. As for the crew members, so each crew member was paid basically like a salary for, this work. And for many crew members, because they're from space field, so their companies, they were understanding, so they didn't fire them. They basically gave like kind of like a vacation leave or something like that, and after they finished the isolation, they could come back and continue the work.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Because of time, I think we need to move on to the next question. But if you've got a very sort of small remark or ending closing remark, then I'm happy to. No, is that okay? Fine, great. Sorry about that, Martina. So Mary, you've had patiently your hand up for a while, so I'll hand over to you.
Hi, I actually worked at NASA Johnson Space Center, just retired recently, but one of the functions that we did when Shannon Lucid came back from her stay on the Mir space station, she decided that American astronauts were simply not prepared to spend long amounts of time in close quarters working with a crew of 3 or 6 on space station. So she started a program then, it was a precursor to some of this, to put 7 crew inside one of our vacuum chambers, not at vacuum, of course, but and isolate them and give them various psychological stressors to see how they would interact with each other as a crew. Stressors like give them 4 beds for 7 people, weird noises that they couldn't turn off the power, or not let them turn it back on, make them work through various things. And I think we did this about 2 times, and it was so unpopular with the crew that they never did it again. But originally she wanted to have all the astronauts go through this sort of isolation period in the vacuum chamber. We did with human test subjects at one point, put people in the same area. It's about 300 square feet for 30, 60, or 90 days. And one of the interesting parts of that was that they developed a distorted sense of how long a day was. Their days, instead of being 24-hour days, since they didn't have any insight into the outside world, became more like 25-plus-hour days eventually by the end of their either 30 or 60 or 90-day stays inside that area. So I didn't actually have a question. I just wanted to toss in that little bit of extra history.
Oh, thank you. It's really, yeah, it's fascinating.
That was back in like the Shannon Lucid part was back in like the late 90s, and the other was in the early 2000s, I believe.
So interesting, isn't it? And just one point, Anastasia, I don't know if you, but is a day is slightly longer on Mars as well? Let's say if the Mars habitation programs actually take off and go forward, and it's slightly.
It's only 40 minutes longer.
Not that much longer, but just enough to with all of these other effects that you're both talking about, enough to really rock the boat and cause some strange effects on sense of time and time distortion and where they are and what's going on. But amazing feedback. Thank you all. And we have people want to contact you. So is there a way that they
I'm
can
glad. they can add me on, write me on LinkedIn or any social media. So I think it was on my slides, the address. So I'm happy to answer question and, to cooperate.
Wonderful. So if you connect with Anastasia on LinkedIn, she'll be happy to answer the remainder of the questions. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.